We were in Djibouti to do a number of stories ahead of the election. It's a small country in the Horn of Africa, but has been making the news lately, particularly with the numbers of international security bases there. But we also wanted to look at other things. For example, visit a refugee camp where people have been arriving from Yemen, looking at business, the state of the economy, and of course the political process. And on Friday, we interviewed an opposition candidate, Omar Elmi Kaire, and as soon as we finished the interview and we were going about our business, we noticed we were being followed. And I thought, well, that's bizarre, but not unexpected in this kind of country. But later on in the day, we were approached by about 6 men. They bundled myself, the cameraman and producer, into a van, and they took us to a building which they said was a national security premises, and we were questioned there, and we were held there for so long, and we were held for, I think, a total of about 19 hours before we were expelled and put on a plane out.
Was there any explanation given for your expulsion?
Initially, they said that that we didn't have the right accreditation to be in the country. The first thing when we arrived in the country on Thursday was to meet the Director of Communications from the Ministry of Information. He's the one who accredits journalists coming in, and he assured us that everything was fine and we could go across the country and do our reporting. The other accusation they made against us was that we posed a threat to the president because we were going to a town where the president was carrying out a rally, and they said that we had been taking photos of his house. We didn't even know where his house was. It was my first visit to Djibouti, so I had no clue where his house was. They also said that we were supporting the opposition and asking why did we go to interview this opposition candidate. And I said, well, this is the election period. Of course we have to interview politicians, both from the government side and from the opposition.
And have you been able to keep any of the material that you gathered?
Yes, I mean, we had barely gathered anything. We only had 2 interviews which we did when we arrived there. The first was an interview with the foreign minister. The second interview was the interview with this opposition politician. We had not gone anywhere filming, so we didn't have any other material that they could use against us.
Is there anything in that interview with the opposition candidate that might explain why the authorities got so twitchy?
What I understand was the opposition politician was raising concerns that the government was not allowing the opposition to carry out their campaigns freely. And before the elections, they had to submit their campaign schedule to the Electoral Commission. And he said that the government saw their schedule and would go ahead of them so that whichever town they planned to visit, the government would carry out its own rally. So that's as far as I know from that. And nobody else had even seen the interview.
You've clearly been through an ordeal, Tommy. You weren't in country for very long, and it's not a place that we do often get to, but were you able to get any sort of sense of what sort of shape the country is in ahead of elections?
Going around, we saw mostly campaign posters from the president. We did not see any opposition posters anywhere. And we sort of thought, well, maybe the president is truly popular here. And we went around, and it seemed as if the president and his party were overwhelmingly prominent around the country. But we didn't notice anything that really stood out for us at the time. That's why all of this came as a shock to us.
And Tommy, remind us why Djibouti matters.
It's a sort of enclave of peace. It's got Eritrea to one side, Somalia to the other, Yemen to the other side as well. Ethiopia, one of Africa's most prominent economies, depends on Djibouti's ports, and they're also along a busy international shipping route. And of course, there are all these military bases, the US, France, Japan, Saudi Arabia is now planning to have one. China's already constructing its base there. So it is prominent in both business and in military terms.